those audiences that didn't think that Ballerina was actually going to amount to much and that Ana Diarmas was going to be little more than a flash in the pan as Eve, rest assured the entire opposite is true. What you get is a solid foundation laid down in the first 10 minutes, which gives her all the motivation that you could conceivably want from a John Wick movie. Not only does she deliver in terms of the character, which some people might call it a stilted performance, but ultimately if you look back at Keanu Reeves as John Wick, he's not exactly stretching the envelope in terms of performance. So essentially what you get is a further expansion of the John Wick universe. Yes, Gabriel Byrne does rock up and he does deliver quite a convincing bad guy. You also get some form of emotional payoff. Keanu Reeves is in this film for much more than a blink and you'll miss it sort of cameo, which is awesome, which sort of gives it gives the film itself authenticity. So I'm going to be giving Ballerina 4 out of 5 on the big old 5 scale. Why? Because ultimately it delivers against all the odds of people that maybe were under the impression this was going to be like a flash in the pan, that this wasn't going to be something that could measure up, that ultimately this was just going to be another cash grab exercise. You will be sorely mistaken. You have been undermined and ultimately you're going to be quite surprised by it. So I would recommend checking this out in cinemas. So 4 years on from the original, Amisha is now giving a conference talk to a packed auditorium peddling Melissa McCarthy's book, which is written in the aftermath of the messy finale which made up the end of 9 Perfect Strangers Season 1. This inevitably goes wrong in the foundation in that opening moments, and then boom, she's rushed off to the Austrian Alps, all very picturesque, all very sort of glacial and sort of serene, and she starts all over again, this time microdosing people with their consent and sort of like getting a select group of people together with their own specific neurosis. So ultimately I think the enjoyment that anyone gets from 9 Perfect Strangers Season 2 will obviously be reflective of how much they enjoyed the first season, but also how much they connect with the characters in this second season. But for me, I really engage with this, and ultimately the twists and turns which this show unlocks and to what extent it may lead on to a third season is up for debate. So I'm going to be giving 9 Perfect Strangers Season 2, which is currently streaming on Amazon Prime, a 3.5 out of 5 on the big old 5 scale. Why 3.5, you ask yourself? Well, the thing is, it's very much dependent on how much you connected with that first season as to how much you're going to enjoy the second. It's got a stellar cast, it's got all its ducks in a row, essentially, and it's a solid story, well told, with a decent production value. But the thing is, it's subjective. So as you would expect from a Dennis Lehane creation, what you've got here with Smoke is a lot of character-driven drama. Taron Egerton plays a police, an arson investigator. Prior to that, he was a firefighter. He got wrapped up in a traumatic experience, and now he sort of has a fight or flight fascination with the flame, as it were. Alongside him, you've got Junet Mollett, who people may remember from Lovecraft Country. She plays a police detective who is reluctantly partnered with him because he has a spate of fire, a spate of arsonists around the area he is investigating, and so he needs help. I think above all what Smoke does, and it does so effectively, is it creates atmosphere. It does a very, very good job of world building. You get an idea of Egerton in this role of his relationship, his family, his work with his colleagues, and you also get an intimate number of flashbacks into the trauma which is ultimately defining him, as well as Julia Smollett. She does exactly the same thing, and this is also shaped into the actual show itself, so it feels authentic, it feels grounded, and it feels in the moment, and ultimately it feels relatable. At least that is how audiences will hopefully connect with it. So I'm going to be giving Smoke a 4 out of 5 on the big old 5 scale. Why? Because this is a very well thought out character-driven drama, purely on the basis of those first opening 2 hours of this show, with Greg Kinnear, Taron Egerton and Junet Smollett, as well as obviously the creator Dennis Lehane, who feels so much a part of this show, of this creation, as you would expect him to. But ultimately that really does dictate the tone, it really does dictate the drama, and it really is quite an enthralling and sort of slow burn mix of a thriller. So Fountain of Youth is a boy's own adventure written by James Vanderbilt. The name may be familiar to some because he was the writer behind David Fincher's Zodiac in 2007. Diving into Fountain of Youth, we've got John Krasinski and Natalie Portman playing brother and sister Luke and Charlotte Perdue. For various reasons, they become entwined in going off in some sort of foolhardy adventure, looking for a thing called the Fountain of Youth, which, to be fair, is never entirely explained. So the best thing you can say about this Apple original Skydance collaboration is that the production values are extremely high. There's polish, it's globe-trotting, goes between London to Cairo to various other parts of the world, and it is truly cosmopolitan. But the problem is there's so little story there, and what you have seen, it's full of tropes, it's full of conventions. Possibly the best thing about it is Natalie Portman, who manages to sort of salvage some sort of character development from the vestiges of the movie, whereas John Krasinski, even though he's done Jack Ryan and he's well versed in action adventure stuff, just seems a little bit either indifferent or just, I don't know, not particularly interested. So I'm going to be giving Fountain of Youth a 3 out of 5 on the big old 5 scale. Why? Because it's distinctly average, it's quite pedestrian, there's minimal character development. It should be so much better than it is considering the casts that are involved, and that is why it's getting the score. So at its core, A Very Long Carriage Ride Home is ostensibly a period drama. It focuses on a plucky sort of very Jane Austen-esque heroine who teams up with the town drunkard to bring down a scurrilous individual at his own wedding. Yes, that's exactly what it says on the synopsis. You know, the scenes feel quite fractured. The dialogue is a little bit overly elaborate, shall we say, is the best way to put it, and it doesn't feel particularly grounded or relatable on certain occasions. Now, people who are cinephiles, people who love film and cinema, have always hailed AI as being this, the death of cinema, the death of creativity and artistry and acting and everything that makes cinema what it is. I'm inclined to disagree to a certain extent, because ultimately you have to open your eyes to the capabilities of AI and what it is actually able to do. And within the confines of its capabilities as they currently stand, this is quite an achievement. A Very Long Carriage Ride Home, yes, it does have its flaws. Yes, there are obvious technical glitches within it, but there is no denying the fact that AI is getting more sophisticated. So I'm going to be giving A Very Long Carriage Ride Home a 3 out of 5 on the big old 5 scale, because I'm looking at it from the perspective of this is created by artificial intelligence. This is not a contemporary movie in the traditional sense, so you have to be a little bit flexible in terms of your judgment, maybe your critique of this particular film. So early word round the campfire for 28 years later is that everybody is loving this latest entry that brings back Danny Boyle and Alex Garland into the fold. Yes, there was 28 Days Later, then 28 Weeks, which wasn't actually directed by Danny Boyle, starred Jeremy Renner and Idris Elba. This one has got them isolated, as in Jodie Comer, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, isolated on an island which is separated from the mainland by a causeway, which is only accessible during low tide. That sets up the premise, that sets up the objective. Then what you have is essentially Comer in bed suffering some sort of mystery illness. You've got Aaron Taylor-Johnson, who is the hunter-gatherer, and then his son. What they then do is they go out on a hunting trip, ultimately sort of like his first time outside the compound for this young boy who's supposedly only 12. What then ensues is not really a great deal. You get a decent look at the infected. There are some interesting segues in terms of the way that they've evolved and how there are different types. That's interesting, and visually it's also quite engrossing, quite intriguing, because this was shot primarily using lightweight camera equipment, including iPhone 15 Pro Maxes on bespoke set rigs, camera rigs for certain shots. So this does feel very much like a Danny Boyle movie. What I felt it was missing, let's see, I don't think there was enough of the infected. I don't think there was enough confrontation. The tension was there were certain moments where the tension was sustained. There were also certain moments going into the film which didn't tie up. So when Taylor-Johnson and his son go off, You get lots of the infected, but there is another pairing that goes off the island later on in the film, and miraculously they virtually encounter no hostility of any kind, which is kind of weird. So some reviewers have compared 28 Years Later to Train to Busan. They've also compared it to Apocalypse Now or Heart of Darkness in terms of its, I don't know, how impressive it is. But ultimately, I'm going to be giving this a 3.5 out of 5 on the big old 5 scale because this is a wafer-thin story. There doesn't seem to be enough going on there to support the characters. There was also word that this is like the first in a new trilogy, and my first feeling is, what else is there to say? Where else is this going to go? So with Scott Frank and Department Q, you know full well you're in safe hands, because this is a world-renowned screenwriter who has a way with words. As I said at the beginning in the intro, this is the guy behind Logan. This is the guy behind Queen's Gambit. He really does pack a punch dramatically. So with Department Q and adapting this sort of murder mystery character study sort of thing, Matthew Good plays Carl. Carl is introduced early on in the first episode, overcoming the trauma of basically seeing his partner shot. He gets shot himself, and then he is undergoing psychiatric evaluation following the incident. So the case he chooses to investigate is that of a missing person, Merritt. She is a lawyer. She's played by Chloe Perry, and ultimately that is what this entire season hinges on. And what you get is you get shades of Carl's character. You get to understand the psychological way his mind is put together. Also, in a very clever twist, you also get to examine and see Merritt in her various phases, both at work and after she has obviously gone missing in this missing persons case. There are some people, the ensemble cast, supporting players that are also part of the story, which I won't go into, because as I said, with Department Q, the best way to enjoy it, I think, is to go into it cold. So in terms of rating, I'm going to be giving Department Q a 4 out of 5 on the big old 5 scale, because you know, it really does intricately unpack and layer so many story threads together in true Scott Frank style. There's drama, there's tension, there's pathos, there is emotion. You do get drawn in as an audience member, and it truly is it's a series that needs to be seen. It's on Netflix. On that note, I'm going to dive into my trailer. Let's do that. And so it is, you've reached the end of another video review, this time for Department Q, which is currently streaming on Netflix and stars Matthew Good, Kelly MacDonald, and a plethora of ensemble players. So this is the bit where you go, if you like the video, then give me a thumbs up. Failing that, you can always just drop a comment in the comment box below and I will respond. And finally, just subscribe, so that every Tuesday and every Saturday when I drop another one of these videos literally into your lap, you'll get a little notification. You can pop in and watch or listen to as much or as little as you'd like, and then go about your day. In the meantime, check out the rest of the channel and maybe pop over to the Patreon page. Take care. Cheers now.